Well, first, I want to welcome you. Thank you so much, Grace, for being so graceful and accepting coming on to my podcast. This is an emergency, in my opinion. And the reason for it is because I had said on Twitter that you hadn't replied to our survey at the Reconciliation Action Group, when in fact you had. And I want to apologize unreservedly for not expressing that, for saying you didn't when you had. So I apologize unreservedly for that, and I appreciate you being so gracious and being willing to come on my show. And I just say thank you.
Yeah, no, it's okay. I understand. I'm honored to be here. I mean, with all this technology, what we're talking about, I mean, we just get so much information. It's easy to get sort of buried, right?
It really was. And I know on September 30th, I was doing all this data entry. And then at a certain point, I was like, oh, I'm so exhausted. And I must have just got your email shortly after that. So I apologize. And then part of our other team actually helped and did put it on. So it was even there, it was even available, but I hadn't had a chance to see it. So
Oh,
I just thank you so much for it. And thankfully, the rest of my team did not drop the ball. It was just me. So that's part of the reason why I just wanted to apologize just to you, because it wasn't anything to do with our team. It was only me that had done that. So
oh,
yeah, but if you have a few minutes, I'd love to go over some of it with you, because the best part about a podcast is that way we can actually talk about your answers in more of in-depth way, and then that will help so much with folks trying to make their decision. So I just found out because of this that we actually have the PDFs of everybody's answers, including yours.
mhm.
So yeah, I was hoping that we could maybe go through some of them and talk about it. And I think for me, one of the issues I have is that so many folks are still in denial of the genocide that Indigenous people are under. And there were some answers from other candidates that were quite shocking and not helpful. And so I just want to give you the floor and talk about First Nations from your point of view, and what got you interested in this topic, and as a mayor, how you feel about
Mhm.
implementing plans, however you want to frame that.
Well, I think for me, this is very close and near and dear to my heart. I have Indigenous people in my family, and who, obviously, my brother-in-law, they live in Edmonton. And so his father, back then, he went to what's called an industrial school, which is kind of the same thing.
No,
Was
it's
it?
exactly the same thing, and I
Yeah,
don't want anyone to be confused by that.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And so, he went through the trauma, and so again suffered, um, trying to deal with the abuse. Okay. And then tried to, that was in Ontario where he was in this industrial school. And then so to get away from um, sort of the path of abuse of alcohol abuse and or alcohol abuse, they moved. They moved from Ontario to Edmonton, but there's still the generational trauma that happens.
Hmm.
And so, I think, when I talked to my brother-in-law, who actually happens to work for um, Alberta Justice for the government in on the Indigenous side, um, there is a lot of talk about what can help, various programs, what people can do, but it's time to actually take action. It's the action that needs to happen. There's
Yes.
so
And
many talks about solutions, and we can talk and talk about solutions all day long. But we need to take action and actually do the things that's supposed to make, actually, have the reconciliation. Start,
hmm
and understanding and learning, because we're constantly learning. I talked to, Chief Prochild, who's a really big supporter of mine, actually. And and that's what he says, we just have to keep learning. about the reconciliation and amends and what we can do moving forward based on what we know.
Mhm. Yeah, no, that's great. I'm really glad you have a relationship with Chief Crowchild. I was wondering if you had, because you said other First Nation chiefs, so I was just wondering who are some of your relations that you have, like
Well,
Roy
so
Whitney as well, or
yeah, no, I've spoken with, so the elementary school I went to had, we went to school with a lot of Indigenous people. So it was St. Benedict. And so we went to school with the one spots, the eel tails, the starlights, like, so, um, so we grew up with Indigenous people. But you know what? And I look back and I'm thinking, well, we didn't even have Indigenous studies, which we should have. That should be part of the curriculum, you know?
I'm so glad you brought that up because that's one of the key issues is that I'm shocked to tell you this, but a lot of folks are unaware of the curriculum that is being presented at this time that actually is really problematic and purposely excludes Indigenous people, purposely excludes the 94 calls to action. And, honestly, this has been around. There's actually no excuse for the current council why they haven't done more. And I'm really, I ran in the last election because I was trying to implement these calls to action, and the inquiry was something I knew was coming, the calls to justice, and I wanted to implement that as well. And I'm sad to tell you that how few Canadians are aware of it. They sit in the, oh my God, I'm so sad, and oh, that's so painful. And it's like, oh, that's great that you get to be there and be sad while we are still undergoing genocide. So we had the Sisters in Spirit Vigil on October 4th. And unfortunately, not very many folks came that are, supposedly running for positions of power. And we have Sonny Crazy Bull's vigil coming up that honors him because he died in police custody within 90 minutes of being in police custody, and the year anniversary is coming up. So, it's really disappointing to, I share this information. I've been sharing it for years. I've been talking about reconciliation through a book club that we've had for over 5 years. And it's actually the folks from that book club working on in the Reconciliation Action Group. And that group was formally Change Langevin School because, you know, me and other Indigenous people have been advocating for these changes for years. And we literally had non-Indigenous people say, oh, well, it doesn't say specifically in the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I have this series, the volumes of books here. And very clearly, whoever felt, ignorantly confident to say that did
Yes.
not do the work and understand. But, Murray Sinclair, one of the commissioners, clearly said that you have to work with the reasonable and give tools for the reasonable. And clearly you're reasonable and also impacted with having family that has been impacted by poor government policy. So yeah, so and you said here that you are an advocate for harm reduction strategies as well. So that's fabulous. That if there's anything that you'd like to kind of elaborate on,
Yeah.
the floor is yours.
Well, I think, talking about, Langevin, and then they did change the name now. Okay. Langevin School, right? And I did go to Bishop Grandin High School. And so they've changed that name now. It's Our Lady of the Rocky Mountains, I believe. So, now we're seeing, some action being taken, baby steps, I guess. But we really need to, I mean, that's just a start, changing the names. But there's just more action that needs to be taken. And like you said, there's all these vigils and all these different events for the Indigenous that people aren't even aware of. So there needs to be a bigger messaging from the city. Okay, these are important events coming up, because we hear about other events.
Mhm.
Okay. So, and again, as mayor, that's what I need to make sure, that in the diversity and inclusivity, that all these events are communicated, and that people are aware so that they can go. Because if people knew it was there, I'm sure they'd go. It's just they don't know. They don't know when it is or where it is and what's happening,
Hmm.
upcoming events. So that's really important. Um, but yes, the harm reduction, we just don't need one big facility. We need various ones around the city. Um, and that's what will be safer for all Calgarians.
Yeah, agreed. Well, that's wonderful. Call it Action 57 is all public servants given anti-racism training and Indigenous education. And I'm really hopeful that that might be something actually implemented, especially after the Black Lives Matter movement that has shown so much, conversation on anti-racism. Oh, what are your thoughts? And or I guess too, obviously you probably have lived experience. What were some of the reasons why you ran? And do you want to talk about racism?
Yeah, well, I think for me, um, so I was born in Manila, Philippines, and my family moved here when I was 5 years old. So and it was in the middle of winter. It snow, like mountains of snow. What we've never seen snow in our life, and so my mom said we landed and it was minus 35, and coming from plus 35, we almost just got back on that plane, right? But of course, and my parents came here, their degrees weren't recognized, which is another sort of, issue, which we have to address with the provincial and federal government, because a lot of immigrants coming here are facing challenges that they have to just start over again. So, I mean, my parents moved here in 1975 and basically had to start over. They came here with 20 dollars and worked hard. My dad, he had his own business. He opened up, and we all worked in the family business. My mom became a nurse. She was 38 years as a nurse,
Mm,
and so for me, the country, the city has offered my family a lot of opportunities,
mm,
and we've been successful. And now I think for me, it's about giving back now. It's about looking out for the best interest of Calgarians. I chose to be a politician. You know, I'm not a career politician. I'm a business person. I'm an entrepreneur. And, I think people were asking me to run and last term and I didn't. So I thought, okay, this is the time that I should run now. And of course, throughout just right from the beginning and talking about racism. And I'm not saying it's racism, but right from day one, my signs were being targeted. They were defaced, demolished, vandalized. My car was broken into in front of my campaign office. They broke the glass, took all my campaign stuff. Like the whole car was cleared out. So we've been dealing with this, and thank goodness for my volunteers. Relentlessly every day, we fix the signs and we just carry on.
mhm.
You just deal with it, and it's just part of the campaign. And so, and my signs are big. They're 4 feet by 8 feet.
Yep.
You can't just tuck that in the trunk of your car.
Yeah.
So and it was getting expensive replacing these signs, and so we had to think of something. So we just actually released it to the media that when that was happening, we embedded GPS trackers on the signs, because now we're thinking, okay, if somebody steals it, then we're going to find out where it's going.
Yep.
But this is how sophisticated this is. When we embedded the GPS trackers, it stopped. They weren't stealing the signs anymore. So they had GPS tracker sensors. This is how sophisticated this whole thing is.
Yeah, I'm well aware. This isn't my first campaign, and I've been trying to speak out about the ugliness of our democratic dialogue and the tactics from some of the different campaigns. But I don't. think people are open to hearing it and they're not interested in entertaining it. And, this country has been founded on racism and sexism. So hearing it from a woman of color goes in one ear and out the other. And in fact, even with our reconciliation group, we have over 1 million people in this city, and not that many people are engaged in actual reconciliation work. And when they are, it's very much wearing an orange shirt, not structural racism. And having folks talk about structural racism, structural sexism, when it's literally embedded in our Canadian Constitution, it's shocking to me how obtuse people can be. So, if they're that blind to something so simple and so obvious, what you're going through, unfortunately, is just become the standard because people are okay with it. They're okay with toxic, abusive tactics like that. And it's so bad for democracy, but it's also really disencouraging for women of color, for any marginalized group to even consider running because they know it's not meant for them. And the folks who are in charge don't like losing power in any capacity. So, it's really problematic. And it's really hard for me as an Indigenous woman to encourage people to run in this really toxic system. And worse, when naive people do, and then they're shocked by the tactics. And it's just like, there are books written about it, there are websites, blogs, podcasts. It's not fun. It's not easy. And the average citizen lucky to vote, let alone be engaged in the actual process.
Well, that's it. I mean,
Yeah.
so in our advanced voting, 100,000 people voted, which is 3 times the normal amount. But we have a population of 1.1 million, let's say. So there's 1 million people that still need to vote. They need to exercise their right to vote.
Yeah.
So we really need to get people out to vote. It's important. But what you said is, you're right, because democracy has been compromised.
Mm-hmm.
And with all these allegations now coming out of the dark money, union money, and I believe that any candidate that's taking unlawful money should withdraw. I mean,
yep.
We have election laws for a reason.
And you're talking to the provincial candidate who ran against a fellow who got the RCMP go into his office and take his computer the Friday before the election, and my own family still voted for the man. It just, that is the state of our democracy, and that is the state of the level of engagement that folks are still in. So my hope is with this, I hate to say it, but I think Trump really brought out a lot of the facade that people have been able to shield themselves from. And in the hopes that there are more people now engaged, that there are more people that understand the gravity of the unhealthy toxicity in our democracy, maybe we'll get some more folks come out. We have a pandemic, so those advanced numbers are, I'm hopeful. I had friends who actually even missed the federal election because they got COVID last minute. So my big message to people is to always vote, number one, but vote as soon as possible if you know who you're voting for, and whether or not they're being funded by these PACs and such. And we were the only party provincially that were talking about how unethical PACs are. And again, people just weren't paying attention.
Well,
So
exactly. Yeah. And I'm not, backed by a PAC or TPAs or union.
Yeah.
All my campaign money has been donated by hard working Calgarians.
Yeah.
So I don't have the 1.7 million that some candidates are just, having mail drops every day.
Right. It's incredible. It's incredible how dark money.
Environment,
like, right? We know where they stand already on climate change. Just kidding.
So I really hope that Calgarians can really pay attention. And, why I say that, why have election rules when, does it really matter? Like,
Mhm.
nothing happens, does it?
No, and that's the unfortunate part. Like Jason Kenney's leadership was under scrutiny, and I mean the RCMP, they are not going to investigate conservatives, and I would love to be wrong, but I just see it over and over again, and I like that's why our democracy is not healthy until we start seeing charges that are legitimate. I was utterly and completely shocked that Joe Magliota had some type of like legal issue come at this moment, because I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I think the real news here is that the police did something, number one. Number two, so that is a real conversation. I'm the missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit co-chair. We literally tell people the police don't investigate our murders, and when they do, they corrupt them. And that happened, it happens over and over. It's written, it's in reports. We have calls to justice, calls to action, and no leadership from folks. And worse, the voters are so ignorant. I mean, you've door knocked, I've door knocked. They don't know the difference between the different orders of government. So
No,
it's really problematic,
yeah,
trying to make some change, and then of course their biases come out first. So, but
yeah,
I'm really glad that you're running, and let's focus on some positive things. Is that you're running, you're very gracious to folks like myself. You have connections to the Indigenous community. Lee Crowchild. You have family that's Indigenous. You were saying that from Ontario, so I think that at least that's a start. We had some mayoral candidates that never even replied to our email, right? And we were trying to highlight that. That's what I was attempting to do with you. But as it turns out, you did reply. And by the deadline, we've had a few late submissions as well. So it was really great that you had submitted and by the deadline. So thank you for that.
yeah. And I mean, I was asked um, by the media to comment actually on September 30th.
Oh,
And
good.
yeah, so, and I had help from Chief Crowchild on that because, he says, okay, that's great to have a day as a holiday, but people need to understand and learn why that's actually more important than the holiday.
Honestly, it is shocking to me that people will wear an orange shirt on September 30th and then vote against reconciliation. And so, like, honestly, because I see it all the time.
Oh my
And
God.
and I just don't understand, like, okay, so you claim you want to solve this issue. We're telling you what the problem is, here are the solutions, and you're legitimately voting for people who have like even the purpose to be against our community, which within
So they
itself
don't
is
understand
incredible.
it again.
Yeah.
They don't understand it, and it's just an orange shirt day. Well, no, actually, let's just focus. I mean, so what I really liked was Mount Royal didn't shut. They focused the whole day on learning about the Indigenous studies. Okay,
Mhm.
I think that's more important, and I think all the schools should have done that.
Mhm.
It's not about shutting, you know, we need to spend that day on learning about it.
Well,
Okay.
and I would say, like Remembrance Day, there should be a week lead up where people are learning about it so that on the day, rather than me doing data entry on reconciliation work on politicians who have no intention of doing anything, it should be I'm actually allowed to participate in my community in ceremony. And that's the problem, is that like our own people were working it. Our own people are still forced to educate rather than mourn the way we
You
should
know
be.
what?
Yeah.
You're right, Michelle, because for Remembrance Day, you're right, they've got a week, or I think it's even longer,
Yeah.
where Salvation Army is collecting money for poppies.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we need to do that, collect money for, like, okay, so it's orange shirt, or okay, that's what you do instead of a poppy. It's an
Yeah.
orange shirt,
Yeah.
okay, that you wear for the whole month or whatever, but that we should have collection, times as well, for just like Remembrance Day,
Yes.
just like that.
Yes.
It
And same
should be.
with October 4th for Sisters in Spirit Day. And we do marches on Valentine's Day every all the time. And then that's the problem, is that Canadians are even unaware, even though October 4th, like literally Harper and Rona Ambrose did the cuts to Sisters in Spirit October 4th. And people are still unaware because they're not paying attention, because they just ignore Indigenous voices. So, my hope is that folks that care, legitimately care, get into power and do the action like you were saying. And that is why the commission called them calls to action, because the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples had recommendations. And those have been around since 1996. And yet we still see no leadership from politicians. Like, there's no excuses at this point. Like, it's willful ignorance. If I know what is that horse tranquilizer for COVID-19 by the anti-maskers, if I can, research and know about that and try to counter their information with actual science, like, it is just willful ignorance at this point to not know the 94 calls to action, to not know the 231 calls to justice. There's so many reports on so many topics, and we just have, willful ignorance from politicians. And so I just try to work with those who are reasonable and willing, as Murray Sinclair said, and you are one of those people, and I appreciate every minute you've given me here. Are there any lasting thoughts that you want to talk about?
No, I think, you know what, I think what we really have to think about here is for Calgarians to really pay attention and really take the time to understand it. Not just the orange shirt or trying to get that orange shirt that was sold out. Okay.
Right.
And I remember I was at an event, a Ward 3 event, because all of September I wore orange. Okay. And so I was at this event and I was the only one of all the candidates that actually wore orange.
Yeah.
And I said, look, I said, most of the time people are used to me wearing either red or blue.
Sure.
Okay. And I wore orange, and I said, I know you guys are used to me wearing red or blue, but this whole month of September I wore orange.
Yep.
In recognition of the Indigenous, a man's reconciliation
Right
and
on.
action. And everyone just was clapping, right? Because no other candidate even acknowledged this the whole month.
I know, it's so infuriating. I ran hoping to create change. I was lucky enough to be greenlit by the one of the parties one time. I don't know if they'd greenlight me again, but ultimately, I am going to call out racism and sexism until my dying breath, because my daughter's future and the next 7 generations' future depends on us doing the work. So I hope, folks like yourself get in these positions of power, but ultimately, you are already showing that leadership by wearing that orange, by speaking out at these forums, and having relations with folks like Lee Crowchild. So thank you so much for that, and thank you for being gracious of being on my podcast after I totally snubbed you. So I apologize again.
That's okay. Well, thanks, Michelle, and I'm sure we'll be keeping in touch.
I hope so. And good luck on Monday. Please know I've already done my events poll, but I'm here in Lethbridge. So I had to do environmental scan of all of the campaigns and such. And again, it's not just about being aware, but it's also seeing us not as some pitiful souls that need saving. That's the opposite problem. We have so many resources for folks, and the hope is that people will start implementing them and talking about these issues. So thank you from the bottom of my heart, not just for your kindness, not for just being on my podcast, but for your service and for running and talking about these issues, because it's so vitally important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, Michelle, and we'll talk to you soon again. Okay.
Sounds great. Thanks again for being on my show.